got a great case study here. KK, you've been involved with, describe a little bit about what HCL does. And more importantly, how have you started to make the transition inside your organization? Because it's a very difficult transition. And you're one of the rare companies that is actually successfully transitioning into this new model.
So HCL is a $7 billion corporation, started 40 years back, and has reinvented itself like every 5 years. The current shape of the organization came back about in early 2000, when we really had two parts of our business, doing engineering and R&D services, helping companies build products, and then run large IT infrastructure and applications. I think the EXO concept has been what we've been trying to learn in the last few years. When we went back and looked at within the company, we've been doing this in a different shape and form for the last 20 years. The best example was there was a business which was around remote infrastructure management. It was like zero in 2003 and was non-existent in the company. Was started off as a subsidiary or a separately branded entity, not as part of the main company. And that business became the largest business within HCL in the span of 7 years. And that's a business which gave two CEOs, the current CEO and the previous CEO, from the company. So it was like leaving it on the edge. There were enough antibodies which could have killed it. But yeah, that's one example. And now we're doing the same thing again with the next wave. We're trying to figure out ways and means to.
How do you make sure that the immune system in the traditional thinking doesn't attack that thing at the edge? Do you keep it stealth? Do you draw a brick wall? What do you do?
So the first one, what we did was we didn't keep it at stealth because, and I think to your point, Salim, when we were talking yesterday, is if you get the CEO of the company or the one who can make the decision, acting like a quarterback, protecting that piece, I think it really helps because someone is making sure that you need sometimes a bully, correct? Just to make sure that no one does come and mess around with the business. I think what we are learning now, I think, is that with this whole disruption coming in with this whole digital, with Internet of Things, with cloud and all those aspects, the traditional businesses have to be connected to the edges. So we still are doing the edge experiment, but what we started to do with a concept called overlay organizations, most of the time it is the incentive of the individual, the executives, which typically determine where their focus is. So if you can create a model of overlays where you can say, hey, if you want to do something new, it's not going to take away something from you, but let the new one do the way they have to do it, rather than trying to go and break that into pieces and trying to disrupt it out. So that's the experiment you're trying to do.
Interesting. John, are you seeing companies do this aggressively, and how are they managing to keep the edge safe?
Well, I think the point that was made, one of the key principles that we have around scaling edges is you have to have somebody at the senior level, ideally the CEO, but at least somebody who reports to the CEO, who is the champion and willing to fly air cover to protect the edge as the immune system tries to attack. So,
in our experience, definitely not the CFO. Like there's no way.
There are a few CFOs out there.
So talk about some of the other things you've done, because you've done some really interesting other structures to map to what your customers are starting to see.
Yep, so what we realized is that today the way we were structured, we were never vertically structured, we were horizontally structured, which means we had like focus on each service line. We started to realize that with the advent of exponential tech, you're really starting to see the convergence of horizontals really happening in the end customer environment. We are a services organization, and for us, like the first thing we did that we will adopt AI at the core of the services organization. People come and say, services, people-centric, and then you start to adopt AI, correct? So it's like counterbalancing. But then you start to realize, hey, you have to be in the business of really building intellectual property to help your customer and accelerate your services. The second thing we realized is that the customers are not looking at buying capabilities, they're looking at buying outcomes. And your organization is structured around capabilities. So I deliver capability ABC, and you need a requirement of ABC, so I'm able to map to that capability. But when you really shift to a model of outcome-based, don't tell me you could do IoT, tell me how do you use IoT to save money for me, which means you need to bring capabilities from your engineering services, from your infrastructure services, maybe from analytics, from applications. The customer doesn't want to buy individual pieces, correct? They're looking at how do you bring an overlay organization which could really solve. So we really started experimenting with this concept called overlays. So we said you have edges, which is experimenting a skunk's works kind of model, really experimenting on the edge. But then how do you connect that edge to the core? Because if you can't scale, then you will end up having subscale businesses which will not be able to grow on its own. So the overlay is like a conduit for us. It's basically, think of this like a hedge, which is just protecting this hole and bringing it into the core and making sure that no one is trying to go and kill it. So it's an experiment. I think some of them fail, we learn, and the key thing which we realize is pivoting the organization faster. It's that you learn if things are not working, make sure you're able to dismantle and reassemble and move forward. That's going to be the key.
John, that goes to your comment about learning organizations. Are you seeing any large organizations embrace that paradigm of how do you learn faster?
Certainly not in their core. I think that one of the issues we came up with was, we're very big proponents of design thinking and design methodologies, and we said, we've applied it so effectively to our product offers, to the customer experience, to help them get more value. Here's a radical notion. Why don't we apply design thinking and design methodology to ourselves? And take as the primary design goal to accelerate learning and performance improvement in our work environments. We spent 6 months trying to find a single company that had actually done that. Couldn't find anyone. We ended up with 75 case studies of companies that had done interesting slices of work environment redesign, but not holistically taking a work environment and starting from scratch and saying, how would I redesign this to accelerate learning and performance improvement? We think it's a huge opportunity. But
out of 75, zero.
Zero that had done it for the entire work environment. We weren't looking for work environments throughout the company. We said, just give us one work environment where you have redesigned from scratch. And by the way, when we talk about work environment, we're talking about physical environment, the layout of the offices and desks, but virtual environment, the platforms and tools that workers interact with, and management systems that affect the worker experience. How would you redesign that worker experience from scratch if your goal was to accelerate learning and performance improvement?
Well, we found that if you want to do incremental change, then you can use lean and other things. If you want to do disruptive change, you need design thinking and a clean slate and how to think about it. How do you guys use design thinking in your organization?
So we look at two aspects. There's design strategy and there's design thinking. So we're looking at picking up design strategy to really work with our customers to reimagine the business. So we use this theme called reimagining the business. How do you really not look at the incremental way, but really start to ask the toughest question up front? And when you start to really apply design thinking in different parts of our business, we started to realize that there has to be a fundamental shift. So for example, we had a business which was used to be called in the outsourcing business called end user computing. It's like providing laptop, desktops, and usual stuff. And we are platforming that whole business to what we call as digital workplace. Because it's the new workplace, is the consumers. See, people don't want to walk into office these days because they think enterprise IT is inferior to home IT. So your new benchmark is not that you have the greatest stuff, that you have your benchmark is consumer. And then how do you make sure your enterprise, which is the need for security and all those other aspects come in, but how do I still compete and deliver better and still meet the enterprise objective? So hence, using DT, we started to reimagine. Led us to buying a company in the UK, which actually started to rethink and reshape some of these pieces. So some of the acquisitions and some of the M&A is also being driven from some of this new way of thinking.
We want to open it up to the audience for a few questions. If anybody has any questions, shout it out and we'll repeat the question, or we have some mics doing. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, Arjun. Just shout it out, we'll repeat it.
Yep, so the question is that some of the platforms that you're building, are they not being disrupted by the likes of open source, Google, TensorFlow? I think you self-answered the question. So if you double click deep into dry eyes, it's an ecosystem strategy. So we are actually think of like a middleware layer on top of multiple AI engines. So we work with IBM Watson for building a cognitive service desk. We're using TensorFlow to do some of the deep learning capability. We're working with Amazon Alexa for a lot of the natural language interfaces. So what we've done is we've taken individual pieces rather than trying to be an AI creator. I think AI will reach a stage, it's going to become platforms, correct? You will get less than 0.001 cent a calculation on the cloud these days for even AI processing and ML and those kind of capabilities. So it's about, we don't want to be in the operating system business, so dry ice for us is the applications. So someone is building the operating system, we are bringing the right pieces to build the use cases. So we are not building an AI system. So that's one fundamental departure from where we are before. So we are not trying to recreate, and you don't have to compete because partnership and ecosystem is the center theme on which we reimagine the company, and we continue to do that.
If you heard Jeremy Howard's talk yesterday, he's trying to turn fast AI into a deep learning platform, right? So people have a democratized access to it, and so it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. The key is how do you apply it to a specific use case, and can you quickly get value out of it? Other questions? Okay, question there at the back, yeah.
John talked about the importance of accelerated learning, pulling information from stocks of information. How does this affect or possibly mitigate the importance of international industrial spying?
How does this mitigate industrial espionage?
Yeah.
Okay, John, you want to take a crack at that?
Ooh, that's another dark side of all this technology, spying. But our belief is the most valuable learning occurs when people come together and collaborate around a shared performance objective. Yeah, I can go in and break through your firewall and steal some information, and yeah, I'll learn on the margin. But the most effective and powerful learning in an exponential world is around creating new knowledge that hasn't even been documented yet. And how do you create the trust-based relationships where people come together and learn together? And our belief is that's the vehicle that's going to drive learning in the big shift, and the most successful learning in the big shift.
Okay.
So it's pretty interesting. There is a cross-country or a program which was built in India called the Aadhaar project. It was it's a UID project where you can have one single ID per citizen, and it's now crossed 1 billion. And HCL has been a part of that. We are running the whole platform. It was built completely by people taking sabbatical from the likes of Google and Facebook and some of these people who went back, spent a couple of years, built it for the government. It's completely open source. It's the world's largest identity management platform, completely built open source by people who may not be even Indian citizens. And I think it's an example. Now, the platform took a lot of time to really reach scale. It was stuck at 100 million. In the last 2 years, it's reached 1 billion IDs registered. And I think the take is that I think over a period of time, you'll start to see that the boundaries of countries and nationalities, the way we define, will be subject to a lot of fundamental questioning. And I think someone put a picture yesterday around the new way platforms are redefining the boundaries, correct? And I think that's going to be interesting. But I think it's again, the core fundamental human ethics have to come into play rather than trying to be territorial, I think.
And frankly, most espionage today is state-driven or in that sense, right? Mark Goodman, our faculty member who thinks about policy, law, and ethics, he's actually the futurist for the FBI. So if you can get him drunk, he has amazing stories about how people use these technologies in a negative sense. He jokes that we really like the NSA, but it's the only branch of government that actually listens to the people. So you see how well that actually works or not. So we'll see how it works. But certainly this is a huge issue going forward. If you have something digital, it can be hacked. And so how do you deal with that is an important question. Okay. Other questions? We have time for a couple more. Questions? Yep. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, could you tell us, what is the criteria you use to move a business from the core to the edge? And then do you differentiate between a business and perhaps a product line?
John, do you want to start with this?
Yeah, I think, again, the key requirement from our perspective, if you're serious about transformation, again, you can use edge thinking to drive diversification and growth and innovation of various types. But if you want transformation, if you want the core to ultimately transform, our belief is the edge you pick, and by the way, our recommendation, somewhat controversially, is pick only one edge. But be clear that based on your view of how the world is unfolding, that it has the potential to become the new core of your business. And part of it is through a zoom out, zoom in approach to strategy. We think one of the most effective ways of identifying these edges is through zooming out to a 10 to 20 year view of your market or industry to say, what is that market or industry likely to look like? and what kind of company is going to be the most successful and effective in that new future environment. And that typically suggests the edge that could become the new core of the business.
Okay. KK, how do you guys do it?
So we have 3 layers for doing this. So there is what we call as incremental value, which you deliver to your current business. And we have this concept called Value Portal, where every employee, we tell them that every employee is an ideapreneur. So they can contribute and start to create incremental value. Then we run an internal startup competition. We call it Mad Jam. It's like it's funded, like an incubator. And we get people, and it's like crowdsource, and you can have competition. And it also has campaigning. You have to go and get people to vote for your ideas, correct? It's got that kind of a model. And then what we really do is if you pick 1 or 2 and it is really significant impact creating idea, we leave it off in the edge and we follow, Salim, what you talked about, Black Ops approach, is do 2 things. One is create a team which will disrupt your own business. And I think the moment you start to do that, and I think it's always helped us, correct? So it is, when cloud came in, people said infrastructure outsourcing will vanish, correct? For us, we adopted cloud 8 years back. We said, this is because we were asset light. We said we never wanted to be in the business of owning assets. An asset light strategy helped adoption of cloud, and we've been pushing cloud and accelerating the adoption of cloud in the enterprise. So use Black Ops model. I think it worked in some cases for us. It doesn't work all the time. The other is that you have to let the edge be independent. I think the moment you get people to add unnecessary value to the edge, you really create a problem, and then you strangle independence, and that's not the right thing to do.
This is the Walmart anecdote in the same way. By the way, when he talks about Black Ops, the idea is that you have to assume, if you agree with the idea that you will be disrupted, you're better off setting up a team that is trying to disrupt you and doing it to yourself rather than waiting for somebody else to do it to you. The design firm Ideal actually did this. They found their core design capability was understood enough by the marketplace. They were having a tough time adding value. They actually hired a young team and said, go off, set up a company. Your sole job is to attack us. Right? Again, enormously different level of leadership that requires a lot of courage to go do that. But if you're not learning from that, somebody else is. And so we're studying a lot of examples of people doing that. We actually recommend doing one team internally doing it and one team externally doing it, so you actually maximize the learning from that. Okay? Any last questions? We have time for one last question over there. Okay, over here. Hope it's a good one. Go ahead. No, I'm just kidding.
You're building a team for these projects. You're building your Black Ops team. How do you select that team? Do you look at the existing organization? Is it dangerous to do so?
Absolutely not, because the people in the existing organization are constrained by how they've been doing things, right? A couple of years ago, we were chatting at Singularity. We're now like 8 years old. And we were chatting and thinking, you know, if we had to recreate SU today, what would it look like? You know, if 8 years ago, things were very, very different. What would happen if we wanted to recreate it today? And Rob and Peter said, okay, go think about that. And I went off and I realized I couldn't do it. I was too much in the soup of the existing model. I literally can't, I don't trust myself to just step outside the model and think of it independently. So we kind of brought together a team of some disgruntled alumni and a few faculty members, et cetera, and we actually thought about, and what they came up with was very different from what we'd imagined. The people inside the existing organization, subconsciously or not, are too structured and think that we spend a lot of time training them on how to do things in the old way. They're the last people you want inside the new organization. So I've got a particular bias around that. I don't know if you guys think any differently.
Well, one of our design principles for scaling edge initiatives is recruit for passion, not for skills. And the temptation, again, is to say whatever edge we've picked, there's a set of really challenging skills. We need to find the best people in the skill category and configure the team. Again, perhaps counterintuitively, our advice is forget about skills. Focus on passion. Find individuals who are risk takers, who have that drive to get to that next level of performance improvement. They will build the skills required to be successful, or they will recruit the skills. But without that passion, that risk taking, if you just got a bunch of people with the right skills, they're going to get crushed by the immune system.
KK, you have the last word. What do you guys do?
Passion and attitude. I think the second one being the positive attitude. And then the important point which we think is that it's learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think that the key is that how do you keep doing this whole cycle again and again, right? So how do I get a team which is willing to put everything at risk and stake, and they're not cared about their job, correct? So I think someone has to, and I think yesterday Rob Nail made a very valid point when I was talking to him. They said they don't care about their job. I think that's a team that can take really the bigger leap. And I think the willingness to learn, unlearn, and relearn becomes very important, because I think that's how you really tend to move forward.